Hello and welcome to Focus Photography. Today I have a Brownie 620. This model was made between 1933 and 1941 and used to belong to my grandfather. Let's take a closer look. This camera is the definition of primitive. There are only two focus settings. There is beyond 10 feet, and then there's 5 to 10 feet, which all it's doing is moving this little plastic lens out of the way. There are also only two aperture settings. There are, in this case, small aperture, and press this in, and there's big aperture. There's two viewfinders, one portrait viewfinder, and then another landscape viewfinder. The shutter on this is real simple. This tab here locks the shutter open. The pushed in, only one shutter speed, and pull the tab out and the shutter locks in the open position. So one shutter choice, two focus choices, and two aperture choices, which is a total of 4. To advance to the next frame, there's a little arrow that tells you which way to turn this, and keep turning until the next number appears on the little red window. And otherwise, that is it. As I said, simple, primitive, to the point. So to load a new roll of film into this camera, first step is to open it up. So only requires 2 steps. First is kind of spin and pull on this knob here. And then the camera strap is held on by a little secret pull button. Just lift and pull this out, and then the whole box will come off the camera. So once the camera's open, mine is actually even labeled where the rolls of film go. In this case, I've got an empty spool that was up here. This is where the new spool is going to go. I've got a rewound roll of film, and personally, I think the easiest way to do this is to kind of load the new roll, stick it in, and then unfurl the that roll. So the camera is loaded up. Now can put the box back on, and then I like to turn this and push, and this will grab the roll of film in there. And you want to keep turning it. Make sure my shutter is not locked open. I'm going to keep turning this until at some point, notice the line appears in the red window. At some point a 1 will appear, and that will be the first shot. There we go. So this camera is loaded and ready to use. When you first go to take pictures of the Brownie camera, you'll probably have 2 immediate problems. One is, what is the shutter speed? The second is, what are the aperture settings? I did a quick search on Google and found conflicting answers for these questions. Figuring out the aperture setting wasn't actually that hard. I was able to measure the aperture opening and estimated that the focal length is about 75 millimeters or so. Based on that, I calculated the aperture as f11 when it's pushed into the open setting, and f16 at the pulled out to the close setting. And this matched most of the sources I found online. Shutter speed was a bit harder to measure. What I ended up doing was taking a variety of pictures at different metering as if the shutter speed was different, and I found that 1/100th of a second is about what the shutter speed appears to be. Now, that ended up being a bit of a problem because unless the camera was perfectly balanced on a rock or on something solid, the pictures had a little bit of motion blur, and I didn't like that. Normally the solution would be to just use a tripod, but this camera has no tripod mount, so there's a bit of a mismatch here. What I ended up doing was using a piece of wood and a 1/4-20 nut and made a custom little mount. See here, where the nut is embedded in the wood, and then hopefully this works. Just wraps around the camera. And attaches down. So now I've got an attachable tripod mount. You can then screw on and together this makes the camera much more usable. If you've got a camera that just picked up at a flea market or something, you could probably just glue a nut onto the bottom and it would work equally well. If not, then I have to be more creative or just set the camera down on a backpack. But especially the way the shutter is designed, it's hard to get the camera perfectly still to get nice crisp shots. Of course, that's the key to focused photography.
While some of my photos turned out pretty darn good, ProVia was absolutely the wrong choice of film. I only used it because it was the only film already available in the 620 format. However, it's a bit too picky, and I really should have used a film more like Kodak Gold or Portra, as the standard color negative film. I had quite a few blurry photos. There's no built-in tripod mount, and my homemade one would slip a little bit, combined with the fact that there's no cable release and the conventional shutter release is kind of sticky. I'm still working on an improved design for my homemade tripod mount holder. I took a couple portraits with this cameras, and the first one actually turned out pretty well. This is my girlfriend graduating with an MBA. Congratulations. Unfortunately, while the camera lists that the close-in focus range is 5 to 10 feet, it's definitely more like 10 to 15 feet. So the poor picture of my decked out teddy bear here is definitely not focused, and it's focused on the grass about 5 feet behind the subject. This is probably the best picture I took with a Brownie, and that's probably because I held it onto a rock when I took the picture, so there was no blur or motion. In conclusion, if you want a challenge, get a Brownie. If you like this video, please like this video.